Hello, Wellness Advocate Group, Kraig Smyth, my biz guide, Business of Being Human, the outdoor guide for your inner journey. See the camouflage hat, proves it right there. Tonight's topic is your wellness ecosystem. So, thanks everybody for joining. A lot of these topics I pick because they're topics that I think are important. And really, it's an opportunity for me to flesh them out a little bit more. That's one reason I started doing this, and to say positioning myself as a wellness advocate to just have these conversations because they're things that I like to talk about, things I find interesting. So other people that happen to find them interesting too, I really appreciate. And I go through these workshops and record and write notes and kind of put different thoughts together and try to assemble different topics, even though they're all super, super interconnected. And I'm writing the book, Business of Being Human. I'm a quick commercial there. And in writing it, one of the challenges is that all the topics are so interwoven. It's really difficult to kind of say, well, when should we stop talking about this section and leave it and call that the end of it, because they're infinitely interlaced and interconnected, Matakiasi, right? They're all these things flow together, and it's really cool. That's the cool part, to see everything cycle back around and circle back around, and all the different parts coming together and and weaving in and out. And I think that seeing that really speaks to the aliveness of life. When we're tracking dynamic living organisms and energy, that's what it does. All the cycles and all the different parts are all really one part. And that's how ecosystems work. There's actually no such thing as an ecosystem. They're all ecosystems, and they're all interlaced and multiple layers and infinite layers, because every ecosystem is overlapping. And the classic example of, if there's a forest, usually there's a forest and then there's a meadow, but there's a place where there's kind of super dense trees, and then a little bit less trees, and then a meadow, and then a couple trees, and then more dense trees. And there's these things, transition zones, like riparian area, for example, where the river's edge or the water's edge, so many different transition zones. And so thinking about our wellness and ourselves and life, and getting reacquainted with ecosystems, because in contemporary society, there's a huge disconnect from that. In case you haven't noticed, a lot of people, are a lot of people are off track pretty bad, to the point that I find myself repeating, we're on a planet, right? It's like, we're on a planet, we're in an ecosystem. Doesn't really do anybody any good or resemble any kind of intelligence to ignore that fact. And I think that our innate connection to the planet and natural ecosystems is innate. It's what the word means. But somehow people have gotten off track there. And probably some of you remember the Disengage from Linear Mindset series that I've done. A lot of the writings that I do, I title Disengage from Linear Mindset. And I think that that's a lot of what this topic specifically is about. And when we talk about growth and healing, I use the cognitive growth and healing modality to just speak. I think that some people would call it CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, but just the conversations. But really, we're having these conversations and hooking up to the human's most important and prominent tool, our mental capacity, our mental ecosystem. So working through our mental ecosystem to understand natural ecosystems, to disengage from linear mindset, right? So humans' most important tool, our mental ecosystem, our brain, our objective thought process. To work with that, to reacquaint ourselves with what ecosystems are, to get off of the linear mindset. And the linear mindset, if someone's not familiar about it, probably one of the easiest examples to explain that would be, I call it bank account brain or tablature brain. And I don't mean tablature like music scales. I mean not tablature, list. I'll make it simple. Writing a list. Think if we were going to do a cross section of most people in contemporary society's thought process, we'd see a list of things. Or the bank account brain is like, oh, here's something, and I put it in my storage bank part of the brain, and here's another something, and here's another something, and I'll pull it out when I need it. But both of those examples aren't really holistic thought process. They're not really engaging with life in our growth in ourselves in a natural style, as a natural relationship to ecosystems. And to introduce, if something's stuck, and I'm speaking specifically to if a person has, let's say, tunnel vision, from tunnel vision to addiction, one of the main ways to get someone off of a negative cycle is to introduce some more ideas into the thought process. I'll just talk about addiction because that's the best way, easiest way for people to understand. And I say addiction, but linear mindset addiction, including addiction to ideologies, false narrative that we can live in a society that doesn't recognize natural laws, natural planets as the foundation. But if someone's in cycles of addiction, quit smoking, the common thing is, well, you don't just take something away, you've got to put something into the ecosystem or the habitat first. So if someone's trying to quit smoking, I start filling other areas up, like, and it's kind of like cross training, but I would and do recommend some exercise, starting to eat healthier, starting to watch good wellness videos on YouTube, Gabor Mate, Sadhguru, Eckhart Tolle, those sort of things. So we fill up space, and it's the same concept as organic gardening. We want to take up that space and sort of crowd out the weeds. So don't give a place for weeds to grow. And I know that's a little bit of faux pas because they're not really weeds. They're just things growing where we don't want them. I think Nikki mentioned that the other day as that best example of weeds, just things growing where we don't want them. But we won't get too stuck on that. The point being is taking up space in our mental ecosystem by planting seeds of wellness, meaning good habits. So we start putting good habits in, good thoughts, good practices intentionally with our own volition, and that helps align us and starts giving us a little bit of leverage to get rid of the things that we don't want in our wellness ecosystem. So most people in contemporary society are really stuck on, well, just do my average thing here, government money clocks, I say government money clocks because they're inorganic things that the human psyche relates to on a regular basis, right? Printed currency, it's a fabricated thing. The clock is a fabricated thing. No natural cycles work in a straight line. Written law is not natural law. That's, of course, reflecting human behavior, and that you can't mandate morality. I think that everyone knows that by now, but we're still stuck behind that concept. So there's a lot of things that are inorganic in contemporary society. So the way to, well, and that's kind of where we're at. But one of the ways that we can alleviate that within ourselves and within our direct community is by reacquainting ourselves with organic cycles, natural ecosystems, natural laws above man-made laws, the natural value, intrinsic value, food, water, air, shelter, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual wellness ahead of printed currency, natural lifespans, natural cycles, lunar phases, annual phases, lifespans of organic organisms, plants and animals, and ourselves ahead of clock time. So to be conscious and to implement these things as part of our understanding, and our understanding is what's making up a lot of our mental ecosystem, a lot of our holistic ecosystems, and of course, we've got our physical ecosystem, internal and external. Internal, of course, that's modern medicine, right? We are an ecosystem, and we're in an ecosystem. Of course, the ecosystem that we're in would be the planet. And then we've got our mental ecosystem, internal, external. We've got our own individual thought process, and that's affected by what's around us. And then, of course, emotional, same thing, and spiritual to go that way. And of course, the spiritual is very fluid, but still an ecosystem, and still things that we can implement on our own volition into our own personal lives to encourage those things and to encourage the understanding of those things. Going for a run, going out in nature, sitting in the sun, those are all things that transcend all of our ecosystems, right? We get vitamin D from the sun, emotional wellness, and yes, spirituality, absolutely. And then those things all work together and help each other and help our mental ecosystem. So conversely, growing our mental ecosystem is a super easy way to help encourage growth from some of our other facets also. And doing that by simple understanding. So if we're going to grow some more things in our mental ecosystem, if we're going to grow some more understandings about natural ecosystems, first, what's a natural ecosystem? Out here, I think that one of the best examples of that interconnectivity, when we talk about natural ecosystems, and natural laws are going to be there. The interconnectedness, the sustainability, the drive for sustainability. We say if life has a mission statement, it would be sustainability. Challenge, right? Challenge of life and death facilitates life. Balance, ebb, flow, cycles, and carrying capacity. So those 7 natural laws are all found in all ecosystems. And to look at ourselves as not linear, not that our wellness isn't just bits and pieces and on a written on a list of, well, I've got some mental wellness here and some physical wellness here, and I've got a connection with balance here and a connection with carrying capacity over here, to start understanding ourselves in terms of a holistic, living, breathing, functioning ecosystem with all of our facets coming together and attached to these natural laws: interconnectivity, sustainability, challenge, balance, ebb, flow, cycles, carrying capacity. So that's the point of this talk, to help us grow that connection with ourselves, so we can look at ourselves in a dynamic lens, not through a static lens, or the delusion of a static lens, as the case may be. Natural ecosystems out here, the salmon is a good one, and everything related to the salmon. The salmon born in fresh water up in the smaller creeks and comes down through the rivers and goes out into the salt water for several years and then comes back and dies. And when it dies, it feeds the whole stream. It gives nutrients back to the stream. It gives nutrients to the new eggs that are hatching, and even to the forest also. And as those salmon die and just really nourish the forests, and the predators drag fish off into the trees, and of course that salmon decomposing is high in nutrients, and just really disperses nutrients all through the ecosystem. So that example of the salmon and that big cycle, right? We talk about ebb, flow, and cycles, and that cycle is that cycle coming back around with the salmon is a super important part of understanding carrying capacity in natural ecosystems. And different organisms cycle in different times and for different lengths of time throughout different seasons. Typically, spring, summer are times of peak organism growth and peak organism population growth. For example, any stream might have X amount of trout in various year sizes, 6 different size classes, and crawdads in 3 different size classes, and infinite microorganisms, and 1/80th of an otter and 1/60th of a kingfisher. But all these organisms are all on cycles, and all those cycles ebb and flow throughout the year, and even throughout the population's lifespan. So sometimes a good example of that is the lynx and the snowshoe hare. The lynx will have more kits when the snowshoe hare populations are high, and they go through and they go up for 4 to 7 years, and then they come back down, and they go up and they go down. And that's that ebb and flow happening in the cycles. And if we pay attention to our mental, emotional, physical ecosystem, but because the spirituals, there's a lot to say about spiritual, but it also gets more difficult. So speaking in terms of mental, I think is the easiest way to explain things to people. And then, of course, the emotional and the physicals also there. But if we talk about ebb and flow and cycles, of course, with our physical, we've got the times we're awake and the times that we're asleep. And if we pay attention to our emotional cycles, we've got times when we're really in high flow and feeling great, and then we've got times that we ebb and we flow and we ebb. Even if we are like 10 out of 10 emotional wellness, super great emotional wellness, always happy, if we feel we still have these natural cycles and these natural ebbs and flows. And so it's super important to understand this within ourselves, because if we can understand that, and we can add our volition and rest when we're in a natural ebb, and do the work when we're in a natural flow. And just as we align with these things, we become more effective, right? If we were going to go and stockpile food for the winter, like our species did for 99.999+% of its existence, we wouldn't go do that in the winter. We'd go do that in the summertime when the food's available, and save it for the times that the resources aren't as available. So understanding our emotion and our emotional ecosystem goes a long way towards our maybe in-depth conversations. I think everyone's probably hit that point where, oh, you know what, I'm not sure I have the emotional capacity for this, right? If after we've had a long day of work, and even if it's a subject that we enjoy, it's a deep subject, I love deep conversations, but depending on the situation, someone might have just had a long day at work and just might not have the mental capacity to carry on a good intellectual conversation. And then, of course, that leads into the emotional capacity. So we say, you know what, I'd really like to talk about this, but let's wait till I'm fresh, or if we come up with a great idea at 9 o'clock at night after having already been working on a project for 8 hours, we say, you know what, let's table that one. Right, MJ? So MJ and I are working on some good wellness products, some good wellness projects and products. And sometimes we have a long day. It's like, oh man, this is really good, but it represents another 3 hours conversation on top of 6 we've already had. So those are times to just recognize, first we got to take care of ourselves as wellness advocates, right? So there's another good thing about being in the field, to say, of wellness practitioners, and take care of ourselves, and then encourage that. I think that's a common thing for people to recognize when you're starting to run low emotionally or physically, because those things are connected. And if you're running low emotionally or physically, the mental is going to suffer. If you're running low mentally, the emotional, physical is going to be in decline. But that's up to the individual to see that, and to see where all those things come together. Sometimes maybe we're just physically tired, maybe we just need to rest our body. Maybe we're just mentally tired and we need to rest our mind. Maybe we're just emotionally tired and we need to let our emotions rest a little bit. So understanding those things, and they're all connected, but to be able to separate them out a little bit, to have that feel, it's like, oh, you know what, I'm emotionally tired. That's an important aspect to recognize if we're emotionally tired, or even spiritually tired. Yeah. Physically, mentally, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, to think about all those as ecosystems. If we understand all those as ecosystems, as dynamic, living, breathing organisms, just like our own self, it really helps us see parts of ourselves as living entities. And I'll use the IFS example here, to look at ourselves like that, as it's not just me, it's not just I, it's not just self spelled SELF, it's not just a list of those things, it's not just the reflection in the mirror. There's depth to all these things, and it's super important to understand this depth. and talking about our wellness ecosystem, just to help people understand the depths of ourselves. All right, you've heard me say the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, also infant, adolescent, adult, elder, and male, female, both, neither. All those 12 aspects are all dynamic ecosystems in their own. So it's not just me as in singular, there's actually 12 of me. So if people say, yeah, you have multiple personality disorder, I said, no, all my personalities are in correct order and and aligned well. So and to understand our ecosystems more, that physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, I'd like to include there's 4 intellects attached to those 4 main facets. So our physical instinct, our mental objective thought process, our emotional intelligence, our spiritual, our ancestral wisdom. So if we look at these things from an ecosystem, and if we envision all these 12 facets plus the 4 intellects, plus I'm going to throw in some more in a bit. If we think about those as maybe in a solar system type pattern where these are all planets and all rotating in our essence, in our whole self, in our holistic self, then it helps us relate to, oh, this is the elder part of me, right? The wisdom part, the infant, the newness, the vulnerability, the openness, the receptiveness, the adolescence, that really heavy growth and going forward and really feeling in our own volition, the adult with the responsibility, and then the elder, the wisdom to see that. And of course, in traditional societies, there's elders and infants spend a lot of time together. So in the infant, you get the newness of life, and the elder is at the end of that spectrum. So they're both looking at the each end of the spectrum and add to the adolescent and adult view. So these are some of the ways we can cross-check ourselves is, hey, are we in tune with our infant? Are we in tune with our elder when we're doing adult things, right? I think most people in contemporary society get really stuck in that adolescent adult and lose context of the infant and the elder. And of course, in contemporary society, there's not as much contact with the elders, but the elders were the ones that had the contact with the infants. So if the adults are talking with the elders and the elders are talking with the infants, we've got that complete ecosystem. And so that's how I would say part of our wellness ecosystem works, using those concepts. And of course, our male, female, both, neither. We all have all those aspects, and to relate to those, and I think that we can see. Well, I'm not going to go into a lot of depth with each one of these. We'll save that for another time. I think sometime soon I'm going to go through all of our 12 facets, 4 intellects, and then another part of our ecosystem that I think most people see ourselves through, to use that term, is our own natural inclinations and aptitudes. And with that, our volition. And I've been calling this our essential self. So I've been messing around with a few different terms: core self for the 12 facets, essential self for our naturally occurring aptitudes and inclinations and volition, and then our whole self for all those things, including the natural laws. So all these things, the natural laws, the 12 facets, our inclinations, aptitudes, and volition, all those are all swirling around in ecosystems. And I think that probably the easiest way to envision these things is through the solar system model, and to roughly say that they're planets and energies connecting each other. So we see ourselves through, I think most people see ourselves through our inclinations and aptitudes. We can feel our volition, and to use our volition and connect with our physical, mental, emotional, spiritual facets, and our infant, adolescent, adult, elder facets, and our male, female, both, neither facets. And if we feel these things in our wellness ecosystem, we can see where they're cycling through. We can see where all of those experience these natural laws. We can feel where all of those facets, all of those aspects of ourself feel the interconnectedness, feel that drive to stay alive, for sustainability, and right there, and feel that challenge, which grows our sustainability, right? The challenge of life or death facilitates life. And to feel the balance. We can't just stay in physical mode all the time. We can't just stay in mental mode all the time, or even emotional or spiritual mode all the time. We have to balance. And with our own volition, we can pay attention to these things. We can reverse engineer and literally do a cross check. You can put on paper all these things and help resonate. Oh, am I paying attention to, the infant part, the adolescent part, the elder part? Am I checking in with all these parts of our ecosystem, of our personal ecosystem? Um, so a little bit about understanding all these different parts of ourself, and gives us a more dynamic view of ourself, and facilitates our understanding of self as an ecosystem in ecosystem terms. Another um, actually, I'll stop there for a second. That was a lot. Does anyone have any questions at this time before I start rattling on to some more?
I only got one comment. I like the way that you think about it as a solar system.
Yeah, I think that's a good dynamic way for people to think about all the different parts of us as humans.
Hmm.
It's like, what's a human? What is a human? And so to think about all our different facets, and to think about them in terms of living, breathing entities. And especially, we're on a living, breathing entity. This planet's a living, breathing entity. And, there's things that would call us their planet also, right? There's the
Right.
microorganisms in us, and everything, all parts of us would say, oh yeah, we're on a planet, and we're saying we're on a planet, our planets in the universe. All these are all interconnected ecosystems. So, um, that volition, we see ourselves through our natural inclinations and aptitudes. That's really our person. That's our personality. That's where the individuality, I think, really takes in. We're all created by the natural laws, and have the natural laws flowing through us just like everything else. We've all got those 12 main facets. We've all got those things. And I think that, of course, some people are more prominent in others. Some people are more prominent in their mental or spiritual, and then they're, adolescent or elder, or male or female, or whatever combination of those, both or neither. Um, So as individuals, those attributes, how we align with those, that's part of our natural inclinations and aptitudes. And then, oh, do we like fishing? Do we like trout fishing or bass fishing or steelhead fishing or saltwater fishing or freshwater fishing? It's got to be some kind of fishing. That's the most important thing. Uh, but after that, our volition is present with with ourself, with our own individuality. Our volition seems to stick with our individuality. And the more we understand ourselves on an individual basis and and how we relate to our naturally occurring uh, facets, how do we relate as individuals to our spiritual, to our physical, emotional, all those 12 things. Our volition's there. Our volition seems to like to hang out with that personality, with our natural inclinations and aptitudes. And so to have that relationship, right? This is all relationships, and the interconnectivity. That's all relationships. That's the classic way, Matakiase. We're all related. So developing relationships with this different parts of ourselves, just like we develop relationship with our external environment and the trees and the rocks, and not just other people, but everything. And that's a holistic relationship. People, uh, people get stuck dealing with people, and it's understandable, right? People represent the challenge um, in this world, and so of course that's where the challenge is. I think everyone knows that, and so we get stuck. Oh, here's the focus on the people, the people, the people, but that doesn't absolve us from having relationships with other beings and with other life forms. And the facts are that, first of all, we need ground to stand on. We wouldn't be here if we didn't have ground to stand on. We wouldn't be here if we didn't have air to breathe. Well, that's the trees. When I do the business of human thing, talking about corporate wellness, I say that the trees are our first investor because the trees give us that breath. So we've got a relationship with the trees, and then we've got to eat. So whatever plants and animals we're consuming, so we have relationships with those. And of course, they wouldn't be there if it wasn't for sun and rain. So for each person, we could say that we've got relationship with the ground, with the sun, with the water, with the trees, with the plants, with the animals, then the next person. So if we talk about getting some space, and we talk about adding space into linear mindset and scarcity mindset are basically the same thing. A scarcity mindset, where people get so constricted, linear mindset, not able to feel their emotions, not able to feel their spirituality, not able to feel their mental faculties, right? That's the most obvious part. And people have disconnect from the exterior ecosystem. That's a sign they have disconnect from the interior ecosystem. People don't function as if they know that they're in a natural ecosystem. It's because their inner ecosystem isn't functioning. So our own volition can help us cross-check these things and make sure that we're functioning, make sure that we have relationships with these things. What we were saying earlier about putting wellness into our ecosystem, into our wellness ecosystem, understanding is the key component of that. It's super easy to do that just via speech, the cognitive behavioral therapy, just via speech, just via understanding how natural ecosystems work, and sitting and having conversations like this. And we have conversations like this, and we increase our understanding, and that helps to say, I know there's a lot of people here that are pretty in tune with nature and natural processes. Linear mindset, scarcity mindset, we could say that's hard packed soil. You know, that's a soil that was scraped off. The topsoil was scraped off a long time ago by tractors and compacted. Now there's not any organic matter there, right? That mimics our mental ecosystem. And so bringing in organic matter, right? Natural conversations, organic matter, leaves falling, all that helps break up that hard packed soil, helps break up that linear mindset. So we do these things intentionally with our own volition, and then we're adding wellness into our wellness ecosystem, into our thought process. One of those natural laws, that carrying capacity, is a real important one to understand when we're talking about these things. Life functions best at peak carrying capacity and abundance. So we could say abundance, right? Whatever ecosystem, whether it's the desert or whether it's tropical rainforest, the tropical rainforest is going to generally have more biodiversity, but the desert's going to have as much biodiversity as can fit in its ecosystem, whether it's a square inch of soil and the microorganisms in the square inch of soil of sand in the desert, or a square mile in a desert with some cactus and lizards and owls and snakes and such, scorpions, maybe some tarantulas. Same with the square inch of tropical soil. Same with square mile in tropical rainforest. But all those organisms, whether it's in an inch of soil or a square mile, are all their populations generally hit a peak. And now that peak's not a static number. Don't forget cycles and ebb and flow. So all these different organisms, microorganisms, all the way up to blue whales, all the species have ebb and flow in their populations and in their population densities. So, and those just infinitely interconnect. And they all work off each other. And of course, when organisms die, it creates food for the next organism. So understanding that peak carrying capacity model, and that's how that ebb and flow, the cycles, that allows the maximum number of organisms to inhabit a certain ecosystem, right? And then of course, balance is in there also, because that's the balance, that you can't just have all the organisms doing the same thing at the same time, because that's not balanced. All the ecosystems, all the cycles and ebb flow create balance in those ecosystems and allow those ecosystems to function at peak capacity because they're all balanced. And then, of course, challenge keeps the individual organisms, keeps the overall health of the organisms, of the population of organisms. Challenge keeps the overall health of the population of organisms functioning at peak capacity, right? Because challenge creates strength. Challenge of life and death, and in natural ecosystems, a lot of things don't make it. That's just nature's way of making sure that all ecosystems as a whole are as healthy as they can be, and the healthiest organisms survive, and of course pass on their genetics and help keep that sustainability going, help keep the population sustaining through their strength, which strength includes adaptability. If there's a fluctuation in the environment, whether it's short-term, whether it's rapid, or whether it's slow, that's still, that's evolution. That's how a species adapt to their environment, is through that. That's a challenge. Changes in the environment represents challenge. So what organisms are going to adapt to that environment? So that carrying capacity, everything naturally functions best at what we call peak carrying capacity, and then understanding that peak is fluctuating itself because it's got ebb flow. Yeah, all that stuff we just talked about. So the question is, are our ecosystems, give me a second, are our internal natural ecosystems functioning at peak capacity? That's the question. And that gets back to challenge a lot. Are we being challenged physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually? Is challenge there? See, we can reverse engineer that. I would say that in contemporary society, a lot of those ecosystems for the average person aren't functioning at peak capacity. Mostly because challenges are not being met, observed. I mean, really, the place of challenge as a whole is not. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get back to where people understand life in terms of natural life on this planet, natural laws. The challenge of life or death facilitates life. Contemporary society would seek to eliminate challenge. Bad plan. Challenge is important. It's not just the easy way. The contemporary society would seek to make things so easy they die of atrophy. Isn't that on that? What's that one cartoon show? There's a little shows all the people just all fat on their couch, and then ultimately they can't even move. Some TV. Right. Anyways.
Wally.
Yes. Thank you, Willis. Wally. There's a lot to be said there, but that's people not understanding challenge. And that's this whole talk about ecosystems. In our mental ecosystem, a lot of people have to use the term, a challenge with the term challenge, right? It's one of my favorite things about, that's one of my favorite Jack Sparrow things, right? Your problem isn't the problem you have is with the problem. So people have a challenge with challenge. They don't understand challenge. People relate challenge to hardship. People relate challenge to just that part. People relate a lot of times, unfortunately, challenge and having to do something difficult, and then that devolves into just having to do anything at all. And some people would not do anything, and just that's a disconnect from natural law. That's a disconnect from life. Here's where boundaries come in. Here's where understanding comes in. The first boundary we have is with ourselves. And then we can start to work out from there. But we have to have boundaries. Those boundaries are a huge alignment tool. Those boundaries are essential for keeping a healthy wellness ecosystem. Sort of like having a fence around a garden, although we don't like fences or walls, but boundaries, see, the boundary itself is an ecosystem. So the difference between walls and boundaries, the wall is the reactive compulsive, quick fix, whoops, something's going on. I'm using super general terms here to illustrate another point, so bear with me. The wall is reactive compulsive. Something bad happened I can't deal with now. Put up a wall. Typically people end up coming back to that, and it's like, oh yeah, there was a need for something there, but now as that circles back around, right, here's a natural ecosystem. We have childhood trauma, put up walls, and then the life happens, and life's natural ecosystem and the cycle brings us back around to address that, right? Because symptoms start showing up where it's, oh, you got a wall back there that's now it's blocking flow, right? It's not just keeping out the bad, it's keeping out the good. It's not just keeping other people away from ourselves, it's keeping ourselves away from ourselves. So we turn those walls into boundaries. Then that boundary is dynamic, and that boundary is an ecosystem within itself that we can adjust and have relationship with, right? All relationships. So all these things we're talking about, all these different parts of ourselves, that's all a relationship that we have. And so to understand our boundaries in a relationship, that those are active and dynamic, and that maybe when challenge comes up and it's talking about having to do something that really we don't want to do, like maybe it's having to go to a job that we don't like, so we have to pay bills because we have to, because we're forced into that system. Okay, that's a thing, but don't let that part of work and that part of challenge get in the way of our own personal development. And I think that that's a huge factor in contemporary society, is people look at challenge as work, and work is a huge placeholder word, has a huge, practically infinite grayscale from involuntary servitude to our personal development. So it's super important to have the boundary with ourselves to discern between those two things when we're faced with a challenge. Is this challenge of having to do something in contemporary society that I feel isn't aligned with anything functional, or is this a challenge that transcends that? Is this a challenge of my deeper self that transcends contemporary society? And one of the challenges that we talked about earlier is understanding these things in contemporary society versus natural society, versus nature. To say natural society, when I mean natural society, I mean, like, our relationship with the bears and the trees and the rocks and the water and all those kind of things, our holistic, our interconnectivity to everything on the planet, not just the human centric part. That's that linear mindset, and that's also a lack of diversity. So if people are just relating to people, and if we understand the place of diversity in our mental ecosystem, that doesn't fit. So diversity in our relationships, and looking at diversity in a holistic sense. Oh, okay. And also, if we look at the way our species evolved for 99.999% of our existence, contemporary science would say Homo sapien, misnomer, but Homo sapien, 300,000 years, Homo species, 3 million plus years. People had relationships with everything then. We had to know how all the other species were working, how the weather cycles were working, how we had to know our natural ecosystems and the ecosystems of everything that we depend on to live. So that's how our mental ecosystem evolved, is with that diversity, with that relationship with other organisms, with other entities. We need to know what kind of plants are good for what kind of trees are good for what the water's doing, what the weather's doing. That's our mental diversity. That's natural examples of diversity and how important that is. And now, if you're going to go back and do another cross section of the human thought process, and most people, they won't have that diversity. The only thing people are relating to is other people, and not only other people, but static items that other people have invented. So if we wonder why people are off track, there's a couple reasons right there. Those are not insignificant factors. The way people have lived, the diversity that grew our most prominent tool, our thought process, our cognitive function. We had to know how many hundreds of different plants and animals, and where all those things were growing, and living at what times and all these other nuances to life. That's how our species lived for most of its existence. And now we don't have all that, all those factors, all that diversity helping grow our cognitive thought process, which is our cognitive thought process. That's the only reason humans got to be humans anyways, is by being able to figure stuff out, by using our brains. So, oh, we need shelter, we need clothes, we need tools, we need hunting implements, we need to make stuff out of stone, we need to make fire, we need to do all these things that all the other animals don't need to do. The only reason we did that is for our thought process, and living that way was giving diversity to our thought process and in essence sharpening that tool. So, right, if everyone understands how that works, the challenge, if the brain's a muscle and we're using it more, it's going to be strong, just like our physical, just like our emotional, spiritual, all those things. If we use it, if we've got lots of diversity, if we've got lots of diversity in our ecosystem when we're functioning at peak carrying capacity, then that's what makes us strong. That allows us to grow healthy. So there's some more things that add to our mental ecosystem, but our, physical ecosystem, same thing. Exercise is important. Ask Caesar. Caesar the dog whisperer, right? No one's getting enough exercise. If the dog's not getting enough exercise, you're not getting enough exercise. Right? And Caesar says if your dog's fat, that means you need to be exercising more. So we work best at peak physical capacity too, right? Understand how did the organism develop? Meaning the human species. Here's a key point that I'd say practically every talk I give, but understanding natural science. And one of the key points to understanding natural science is that you don't understand the organism unless you understand the environment that the organism evolved in. So, right, whether we're looking at elk or trout or eagles or worms or whatever, we have to understand that organism's environment and how that organism evolved in its environment in order to understand the organism. And this especially, well, not especially, there's the same thing. An organism is an organism, but some organisms we'd call pathogens or pathogenic or parasitic, and that's the same thing. If you want to understand the modality of a pathogen, you have to understand its environment and how it evolved. And so all these things is understanding habitat and understanding environment and understanding ecosystems. So if we don't understand an organism unless we understand the environment it evolved in, that means we don't understand ourselves unless we understand how we evolved, like literally as individuals. We don't understand ourselves unless we look at ourselves from an evolutionary standpoint, not just in a lifetime, not just in my 56 years as having a physical being on this planet, but as a species. And also, if we understand context, and if we understand getting a viewpoint of something, right? In contemporary society, we say, oh, let's get the 30,000 foot view, right? This is what we say in business. Everyone familiar with that concept, the 30,000 foot view? Well, we're going to get the 30,000 foot view of humans. We want to get the 300,000 year view or the 3 million year view. That's how we can put things into context. And then we can say, oh, look, just this last 10,000 years or so, that's where things are really different from how we've been the last 3 million or 300,000. So understanding our external environment helps us understand our internal environment. So these are the things that I found to be true, that understanding natural ecosystems, external natural ecosystems, helps us understand internal natural ecosystems. Pretty simple, makes sense. Understanding how life moves um, in these natural laws, all these natural laws around us. Oh, we can see where they're flowing through us. We can see where the interconnectivity is and where the sustainability is and the challenge and the balance and the ebb flow cycles and the carrying capacity. So, if we've been devolving for so long, um, we need to think about, what can we do to increase our carrying capacity in our wellness ecosystem. So, are we doing our physical exercise? Are we doing our mental exercise? Are we doing our emotional exercise? Are we doing our physical exercise? Are we building relationships with these different parts of ourselves? You know, are we doing those? And that is a good thing to write down. If someone needs a cheat sheet to write down those physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, are we doing those things? That are we relating to these different parts of ourselves, the infant, adolescent, adult, elder, male, female, both, neither? Are we using our instinct, our objective thought process, our emotional intelligence, our ancestral wisdom? What are those things? More on those questions, feel free to email me. To get into any more of these conversations, any part of this that was like, yeah, what the hell was that? Feel free to. Yeah, and okay, so I'll stop for another taking any more questions or comments for.
Just remembering what you were saying a long time ago when I was first.
You cut out when you said when you were first.
Oh, when I first started learning about the curriculum business of being a human, part of one of the good things that stuck with me was when you taught boundaries within ourselves and trying to function at our all carrying capacity is the boundaries with self help us keep our senses acute. So you're always like on it. And so you had mentioned something a long time ago about boundaries are the jelly to the peanut butter of our moral compass, is what you had said.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did.
I'm glad you
peanut
brought
butter
that
and
up. I
jelly.
need to write that down. You have that written down somewhere, right?
Yes, I do. I have it in red letters because it
okay.
clicked with me. Sometimes these things you have to, like you say, it's about having the human engage of where they can relate. And so
Peanut butter and jelly. Everyone
peanut
relates
butter
to
and
peanut butter
jelly.
and jelly, right?
Yeah, because you said our boundaries, of course, teaching, boundaries are conscious and responsive versus walls are when we're being compulsive and reactive and we're just all pissed off and we're not even practicing boundaries within ourselves. But yeah, that came to mind when you were talking about all that. I was like, hey, that's the jelly and peanut butter thing that you had said.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
part of learning to be the business of being human, part of the curriculum was boundaries with self so that we can be functioning at our all senses and acutely is what you had said. Remember?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. At peak capacity. Yeah. Our boundaries. Absolutely. Because when we're letting junk in, it's clogging up our carrying capacity. We only have so much carrying capacity. What are we going to put in there? And so to understand these concepts helps us grow boundaries, growing healthy boundaries. We did a whole workshop just on growing healthy boundaries. And yeah, the jelly to the peanut butter of the moral compass, because we can tell when something. Thanks, Griselda. That's awesome. I'm glad you pay attention because it helps me remember the stuff too. Yeah, our moral compass, I say that's like the heart to our emotional intelligence. And to our emotional intelligence, if we pay attention to that in our moral compass, we can we can feel where something's wanting to come into our ecosystem that really we don't want there. That's not good for our ecosystem, right? That challenge of, and that's the challenge of life or death too. We have that. Whoops, Zelda just cut out there. Um, Griselda's glitching. Oh, are you back? Okay.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that to feel that's that challenge of life and death resonating with us through our emotional intelligence, saying, "Oh, look, this doesn't need to be in my ecosystem. I don't want this in my ecosystem. This is poison, essentially. This is bad, right?" So interconnected ecosystems, there's that natural law, challenge of life or death. Um, and the and our emotional intelligence getting together and giving us information, right? To say, oh, here's a boundary. There's a boundary that needs to be here. It's like, oh, we need to grow this boundary, you know. And sometimes when it's in the moment in contemporary society, we need to grow boundaries fast. And when we're meditating to ourselves, we can grow more steady boundaries, and that's when we can sit and we can say, hey, you know what, yeah, boundaries, I'm going to grow boundaries with growing boundaries. And think about that, and to pay attention, it's a boundary for ourselves. If we say, all right, I'm going to start paying attention to where that challenge of life or death, where that natural law of challenge comes through my emotional intelligence and is resonating on if I need a boundary here. So that's a boundary with ourselves. That means I'm, with my own volition, I'm going to grow this boundary with myself to help align me to be healthier. So, people think about boundaries with just keeping external out. No, that's the wall part. Our boundaries are first with ourselves. I'm putting boundaries for myself to help align me to stay on track with my own personal development and with my own wellness. So, yeah, boundaries are super important. Yeah, thanks a lot, Griselda. That was like the next, literally, I was just going to go back into the boundaries a little bit more. But the boundaries are super important because, yeah, we don't want our carrying capacity to be sucked up with non-essentials. And unfortunately, that's one of those things. I shouldn't even say unfortunately. Everything's got a place. All the challenge in contemporary life. Well, we wouldn't be having these conversations if it wasn't for our challenges. So ultimately, even with all the things that we wouldn't choose, it's still the universe is encouraging us to understand. The universe is holding up this mirror for us and showing us that you guys need to understand yourselves. And in that is amazing that we can have wellness in challenging times. A lot of people don't have that, and we're working hard to do what we can, but understanding how we actually function, using natural models, understanding natural ecosystems, those are all super important things. But it takes our own volition and our own boundaries with ourselves to stay on that and to learn more about these things, and so we can grow ourselves, so we can help other people grow their selves. And then that's, that interconnectivity and the law of attraction kicks in, all those kind of things. So that growing boundaries is a huge to understand that more in depth, right? To understand it as an ecosystem and all the different parts. And first, yeah, I'm making boundaries with myself. And if I make them with myself, then they naturally flow out externally, and it's a lot easier to help kind of move other people if needed. It's like, okay, if I don't if I don't allow myself to do this, I'm not going to allow someone else to clog up my ecosystem, with something superficial. But superficial. Meditate on that term, superficial. Probably we don't want any of that in any parts of our ecosystem. I mean, what's that? Delusion? We don't need delusion. Life's amazing. Well, there's plenty to do, plenty of good times, plenty of engagement on our own wellness journey without superficial additives, preservatives, all that kind of thing. I think you could meditate on those terms. Is this an additive preservative that I'm catching from contemporary society? Boundary time, boundaries with the collective, super important. I have a little bit of a meditation I'll share to help with boundaries with the collective. So we did a lot of personal development. We did a lot of understanding who we are, right? Now it's not just me, I, self, whatever reflections in the mirror. We've got 12 facets, 7 natural laws, 4 intellects. Then we've got our naturally occurring aptitudes, inclinations, our volition. So 12, who adds them up? 7, 12, 19, and then our inclination, aptitudes, volition, 19, 20, 21, 22. And these are just all concepts, right? I mean, we're attaching words to them, but to understand the concepts behind the words, right? But now there's 22 parts of ourselves, and then if we say, well, here's our physical, and then there's the infant, adolescent, adult, elder, male, female, both, neither connected to that. And same with our mental, same with our emotional, same with our spiritual. So we're dynamic. So we've grown a more comprehensive, more holistic understanding of ourself. So now, to help keep that ecosystem functioning, I've got a little bit of a meditation about growing boundaries and growing boundaries with the collective. So it kind of goes like this. It's imagine the outside of your energy field, just that transition zone of your energy field, wherever that may be, whether it's, I imagine it out far, imagine it out, 50 feet far enough so that you feel like you're alone. And imagine a waiting room right outside there for everyone else. And you've got 2 suggestion boxes. You've got one for everyone else to put in their suggestion in the suggestion box, and then you've got your suggestion box that you can put your suggestion to everyone else, right? So you've got just you, and you've got the sun and the rain and the moon and the trees and all the animals and just you. And then way out at the edge of that, there's some other people out there, there's some other humans, but they're not in sight, they're dang near out of mind. But just do that one thing. That way you don't have to worry about them. That way you don't have to feel, oh, what's going on out there, right? Transcending anxiety, another huge lesson. This helping transcend anxiety and growing healthy boundaries. So all the rest of humanity can, if they got anything to say, just have them leave it in that suggestion box. And then it's up to you. First of all, if you don't even want to read the suggestion box, you don't have to. It's like, but if you do, only take things in to your ecosystem on your own volition after you've thoroughly assessed if you want it in your ecosystem. And, there's a part even beyond that, or in conjunction with that, is another meditation is and bigger meditation, but super important. Go through and once you understand, we've built ourselves, building more holistic understanding of ourselves, start going through and making sure that everything in your ecosystem is yours. Make sure it's not just random collective consciousness, or from our parents or from our teachers or from other outside influences. Go through and purge and get everything out that's not yours, that you don't sign off on. Imagine going through a process where if there's any energy you're not familiar with in your own ecosystem, that it's got to go through a rigorous process, just like any contemporary narrative. Use that reverse psychology and say, you know what, I'd love to help you, but you got to fill out this paperwork first. Build that boundary with the collective, because as we're all interconnected in our collective consciousness, we want to contribute into that. We don't really want to receive that so much is what we want to do. We want to encourage people to grow boundaries and to grow themselves, not just follow along blindly with whatever's going on, right? People function from our own volition, and having that relationship with our own volition is critical. And having a holistic relationship with that understanding is critical. So growing our boundaries and growing that relationship with all the aspects of ourself, growing our healthy, our wellness ecosystems. Yeah, Griselda says, yeah, if there's an unknown energy, kick it out and say, yeah, fill out an application and then maybe read it, maybe not. But there's lots of meditations we can do there. But and so fill up. I want to invite everyone to fill up their wellness ecosystem. Get our ecosystems to peak capacity. All our ecosystems should be wellness ecosystem, right? Survival of the fittest, challenge, sustainability, all those things should all be positive. We should all be positively engaged with growing ourselves strong. And grow yourself strong. It's a big meditation. A big understanding, a traditional understanding of grow yourself strong. It's like that connection to everything. So be intentional, use your own volition, grow all these parts of us strong. And if there's space, take up that space, overplant with wellness. If you think you're only going to be able to watch one 15-minute wellness video from Gabor Mate a night, put 2 on the list. We have a refrigerator wellness project. Put inspirational quotes on your refrigerator, put them on your dash. Fill your ecosystem up with wellness. Have inspiration. A lot of us have sage on our dash and feathers hanging from the mirror and cedar and all the natural plants, and your favorite rocks. Put some of your favorite rocks on your kitchen counter. Fill up your ecosystems. Ecosystems want to work at peak capacity. Challenge yourself. Grow your carrying capacity, right? Our carrying capacity for our wellness has been shrunken a lot. So we need to regrow it. So we need to put some extra effort into our wellness ecosystem. Kraig Smyth, my biz guide, Business of Being Human. Thanks for joining us tonight. This was your wellness ecosystem. Much appreciate everybody being here Friday and talking about these things. I love talking about these things, obviously. And it's great to see everybody on Facebook. I'm going to sign off from Facebook now, go to the after party. So if you're on Facebook and you're feeling like you're going to miss the after party, you really are. So you should join us for Zoom next time so you don't miss the after party, because the fun's going to start now. All right. Have a good night. Thanks.